Hi there, and thank you for tuning in for another episode of Worlds Collide, the podcast where we talk about moving abroad. I am your host, Victoria, and I said it just before. Thank you for tuning in, though. So, today's episode was recorded a while back, but that doesn't really matter. It is about moving to Japan. So, we did not really have a full episode about Japan. So in this case, my guest is Perry, and he started his journey with the JET program, which is the Japanese English teaching program. And then he moved back to the United States and then back to Japan again, and then he stayed there for good. So if you want to hear his whole story, then tune in. Here it is, Perry. Hi, Perry. Thank you for being on my podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing good, Victoria. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this with you.
Yeah. So, tell me, where are you right now?
So right now, I am in Kagoshima, Japan. It's about the southernmost prefecture you can get to on the island of Kyushu, which is one of the four main islands. Basically, before you get to Okinawa, that's where I'm at.
Okay, I will later definitely check again the map of Japan. Because right now I only have like one long thing in my mind.
Yeah. Just look for Kyushu. Look for the big volcano, and then right to the left of the volcano is my city.
Oh, okay. So how big is that city?
It's about, I think, in southern Kyushu, it's like the second big. It's like the biggest city in the southern part of the island. But even still, it's not that big of a city. It's some population's like 600,000 or something like that.
It's a good sized city, in my opinion, at least.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm originally from Chicago, which is a population of like 3 million or so. So in comparison to that,
So you're totally downsized.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. That was my next question. So where are you originally from?
Yeah. So I'm from Chicago, the northwest suburbs, but we all just say we're from the city.
Sure. It's like me. I say I'm in Austin, but I'm in the suburbs. So,
right. Exactly.
Yeah. Nobody else knows about it. The small places.
Yeah. When I name the actual suburb, people are just like, "What?" And I'm just like, "It's Chicago," and they're like, "Oh, okay."
Okay. And so, why did you choose to move to Japan in the beginning, in the first place?
So I became very interested in Japanese movies when I was a university student, and started watching a lot of different movies at the time. And I was studying to be a teacher. And one day there was like this career fair thing, and they had a booth for something called the JET program, Japan Exchange and Teaching, where they take new university graduates and they send them over to Japan to teach English in junior high schools and elementary schools. And I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. And so I thought, maybe I'll try that. I'll go to Japan, I'll stay there for like a year or two, see what it's like, and then I'll come back to America. And then, 1 year ended up turning into 2 to 3 to 5, and now I've been here for almost 15 years.
And so what was the main reason to just stay there for so long? Do you remember when in the beginning?
At first, it was just the job. It was a good job. I mean, I was making really decent money. I was living in a small town, which it was like they sent me to like this really tiny fishing village where it was a population of like 18,000 people.
Okay.
But it was still pretty decently close to the city. My rent was heavily subsidized. I was paying only like $150 a month in rent.
Nice.
So I was making really good money. The job was really easy. So I thought, well, let's do this for the full 5-year contract. And by the time I finished that 5-year contract, I was in a relationship by that point, and she didn't want to leave Japan. So it's like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to stay here and see how this works out.
And the whole time you always were in the same place, in that small fishing town?
At first, I was, but then
Okay.
after that 5 year contract was up, then I couldn't find another job in that town. So at that point, I had moved to the city area, and I started working in different jobs, still teaching, but just in different capacities.
I
So
see. Okay.
yeah, so I did I continued with elementary school teaching for about almost a year after that, and after that I transitioned into doing started working at like an English intensive school where it's like mostly like college age students or so, and they study there for about 1 year, and they study regular subjects, but they study all in English. So I was
I
teaching
see. Okay.
literature classes and writing classes over there, which I'm still doing that now.
Mm.
I did some business English classes, again, still doing that now. And in the
Mhm.
past, from about 5 years ago, I started working at teaching at the university level as well. So
Oh,
I
okay,
teaching
cool.
basic English classes at two of the universities here in the
Right.
city.
Nice. And so going back to when you came to Japan, do you remember what your first reaction was to the Japanese culture?
I was a little bit prepared for a lot. I was prepared for a lot of stuff just from my experiences with from seeing Japanese culture in movies
Uh-huh.
and that kind of thing. So all the basic stuff I knew, like I knew how to use chopsticks. I knew how to. I knew that you had to take your shoes off when you enter someone's
Yeah.
house. So
Uh-huh.
a lot of I knew you had to bow instead of shaking hands. All those basic surface level stuff about the culture, I was already pretty aware of. Um, but then there are other things that were kind of surprising, like the first time I was in Japan and in Tokyo, and going to the train station and seeing all these people wearing surgical masks, and at first I'm just like, what is
Right.
going on here? At first I'm like, is there like a surgeon convention in town or something?
Uh, okay, yeah.
Because but what I found out was that no, that's just very common in Asia.
It is.
Whenever people
Yeah.
get sick, they always wear surgical masks. So when the whole mask debate were starting up over COVID, I just thought it was the most ridiculous thing. So I'm like,
Yeah,
everybody does that
because
here. It's
yeah, because you're already used to that. Because I've never been to Asia, but I'm also very familiar with those pictures. But was never sure. Is it because somebody has a cold, or maybe because the smog or the air is so bad polluted? So I was never sure what it is.
yeah, I think if you're in places like China, then it might be more the air pollution thing. But
Yeah,
in Japan, it's usually just they've got a cold and they're just
yeah.
trying to keep from infecting other people.
Yeah, that's nice. I
Hmm.
mean, now we all know this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But like when you get there, or even like for us 3 years ago, it was like, what the heck is going on? Why are they doing that?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So that was
Yeah.
a big surprise for me. And then when I started working at the schools, I was a little surprised at some of the things they do there. Like they have basically no janitorial staff. It's the kids do the cleaning, and
Mm,
they don't have cafeterias. The students all eat lunch in the classroom, and the students help
okay.
out serving the lunch. So little things like that were kind of surprising. And
Do they have though like a break room, or where they go for their school break?
they have so the way it worked, at least I think at all the schools I went to, this is basically how it worked. Is they'd have lunchtime in the classroom, and then there would be then they had like a recess time, and they would usually do that outside. I think for the most part. I mean, I was usually in the teacher's office when they were on
Hmm.
recess, and and then after recess they would have cleaning time, and so all the students would clean the classroom and clean the schools and the bathrooms and all that, and then after that they were like so there was like four classes in the morning and then two classes in the afternoon.
Okay, so also shorter school days.
Um, I'm not sure how because I'm not sure how it compares to America. It's been so long since I was a
So
student,
so
but
I have a daughter. She's gonna be in first grade after the
mhm,
summer. So I already been through the kindergarten process.
yeah,
So I don't know how many classes there are in the day, but it starts early at 8 o'clock in the morning or
mhm.
7:45, and then it's until almost 3 o'clock.
Okay, so about the same. It's usually like about like 8:30, 8:40 or something. Then until about like 4 o'clock or so.
Okay, so
Um,
similar times.
yeah, similar times, just slightly different start and end time.
Yeah, that is nicer. At least they can sleep a little bit longer.
A little bit, yeah.
And what about the work environment? I mean, just because the Japanese are so famous for their hard work, like
Hmm.
long working hours, I mean.
Yeah. I didn't have that. I was the program I was on. I was an assistant language teacher, so I would do very little. Like I had very easy work hours. It was like 8:30 to 4:15 was my work day, and basically just come in, maybe help out with some of the planning for, especially more on the elementary school side because they didn't have any English teachers for that. So it was basically just all me doing that. But in the junior high school side, you're working with an English teacher, a
Mm-hmm.
Japanese English teacher. So they would do most of the lesson planning, and they sometimes, depending
Oh.
on the teacher, they'd ask for my input on it. Other times they'd just be like, just do this or something like that. So it would really depend on what teacher I was working with. The work hours at that job were pretty easy. Like I said, it was a simple job. I got paid way more than I deserved to for the amount of
Oh,
work I was
okay.
doing. But the other teachers, like they work long hours. Like they have to be involved in like club activities. They have to be involved in the students' lives outside of school.
Mm-hmm.
Like if a student gets in trouble or something like that, for example, not only like, if getting like police trouble or something like that, not only would the police go to the parents, they'd also go to the student's homeroom teacher as well. So it's
Oh,
like
I
that kind of
see.
thing. So yeah, they're almost like a second parent in a lot of ways.
Okay.
So, and that was at that, like the kind of work I do now. I basically I'm a freelance teacher for all the jobs I do, so I don't have to stay if I don't have
Mm-hmm.
classes. So like I
Mm-hmm.
go in, I teach my classes, and then I leave,
Mm-hmm.
which is very nice. Like I know other people who are under contract or are fully employed, like they have to stay there. Then even if they don't have any classes or anything like that, they still have to be
Right.
on the premises. So that's one of
Right.
the freedoms that has from being freelance is I can just come and go as I please. Um,
Okay.
it is a lot of work though when it comes to like the grading and that kind of stuff. Like that's probably the bulk of the work. And I do work long hours just because of all the different things I do. Like just and commute time too. Like some of my
Hmm.
schools are about an hour away by car. So there's
Oh, so
travel time involved in all.
do you have public transportation where you are? If it's a big city?
Yeah, we've got decent public transportation, but the hours I have to work and the places where my schools are, it's not always convenient. Like for example,
Right.
one of the universities I teach at, that's like an hour away from me.
Mhm.
If I was going to take the bus or all that, I'd probably have to take a bus to like one area and then take a bus to another area, and it would probably take me longer to go by bus than it
Yeah,
would be to just
okay.
drive there.
So you have to do it like during the day, switch
Yeah,
campuses.
yeah.
I see. Okay. That makes sense to use the car then. And then after your contract ended, you said that you moved back to the US?
I had moved back to the U.S. Not after that contract ended. I had still stayed in Japan for about another 4 years after that contract ended,
Uh-huh.
and by the time and I ended up getting married for a brief period, and we were planning to go back to America together.
Uh-huh.
My then wife and I, but she had some problems with depression
I see.
and mental health issues, and about maybe 6 months before we were supposed to leave, she's like, I don't think I can go, and so she had changed
Yeah.
her mind, and we had kind of had like an amicable split after that, and
Mhm.
I had accepted a job in the U.S. With like a medical nonprofit, doing like meeting planning and that kind of stuff. And so I
Okay.
went back to the U.S. and I did that job for about 6 months. But after about doing it for like 3 months, I'm just like I don't like this. I don't like this.
Okay,
I
I
don't like
see.
this work.
Uh-huh.
And I really did miss being in Japan. So after about 6 months, I had found a new job and I went back to Japan.
Uh-huh.
Not back to Kagoshima at first. I wasn't able to find because the way the Japanese work visa works is that you have to get a work visa, you have to have a company that's willing to sponsor you,
Yeah, okay.
which means you have to be a full-time employee of that company.
Mhm.
The places I was working before, they didn't offer that kind of work. So they only offered like the freelance type stuff. So I had to take a job with a school in a different part of the country in Shikoku for about 6 months. And then during that period, I got in touch with my old employers. I also heard
Mm.
from friends who worked at the university, and they were saying, yeah, so if you're here now, we can offer you work, and once you have a work visa, then you can switch over to.
Right.
It's kind of like a DIY visa, where it's if you've been employed by a company and you already have the visa, then you can switch over if you have contracts showing that you're making
Yeah.
the equivalent of a full-time income.
Yeah, the H-1B I think works like that too.
Okay.
I'm not
Yeah.
100% sure. My husband is on the H-1B visa, but if you would find an employer who would be sponsor you and you already have the visa, it wouldn't be a problem
Yeah. Yeah.
to get another visa. You can stay on that visa.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very
Yeah.
similar idea. Like you're not
Uh-huh.
technically sponsored by the companies, but you're showing that, but you're basically continuing on from that.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And so going back to the US, do you remember why you didn't like it?
it was I had moved. I didn't go back to Chicago. I'd actually taken this
Mm,
job, and it was a remote job, and they told me I could work anywhere in the continental U.S. So
okay.
I decided I didn't want to live in Chicago anymore. I didn't want to deal with the winters and all that,
Sure.
and after having gone through a divorce and everything, I just kind of wanted
Mm.
to start over new somewhere
Fresh
else.
start.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I actually went to San Diego,
Oh, okay.
uh, and yeah, I started living in San Diego. Started doing this job remotely.
Like the
It was,
opposite weather of Chicago.
exactly, yeah, yeah. It was beautiful every single day. I think it rained like once the 3 months I was there. Um,
Uh-huh.
absolutely beautiful weather. But one of the things I found out was that I was just really lonely,
Mm.
and I realized how difficult it is to make friends as an adult, which is something that
Yeah,
I
I
think a
know.
lot of
Yeah.
us don't really realize, and especially when
Uh-huh.
you don't have coworkers, right? There was only one
Right.
other person I was working with, and she was in Chicago, and she was like,
Uh, yeah.
20, 30 years older than me, so
So who do
completely
you
different
socialize
situation.
with? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So like there was a bar nearby me, so I would go there sometimes, but it's just I'm an introverted person by nature, so
Mm.
it was hard to talk to people. Whereas
Yeah.
one of the interesting things about being in Japan is because I'm, a foreigner in there, like people are
Mm.
curious about me. So
Yeah, they start talk to you.
so I would always have people come up
Mm.
to me and start conversations with me as a result of that. So it was much easier to meet people, ironically enough, when I didn't, and when I was in a completely foreign country than it was in America.
Yeah, and how was that for your how was your Japanese?
It's after about 15 years, it should be a lot better than it is, but um, like as far as like reading goes, I'm terrible at reading.
Okay.
But when it comes to communication, to speaking, I know enough to basically hold my own.
To hold your own
Like
conversations?
yeah, for like any sort of like for conversations, for
Uh-huh.
daily life tasks, anything like that. Pretty much, it's good enough to get by, basically.
Okay, okay. Uh-huh. And how was it in the beginning? I mean, you worked with a lot of English speakers, but how was it to come by when you didn't speak Japanese?
So at the first place I worked, when I arrived in Japan, I didn't know any Japanese. And in the office where I worked, so when I was working at this place, I was working at I would go to several different schools, so I'd go to like one school per day, and then I'd go back to the Board of Education office when I didn't have to go to any classes. At the Board of Education office, there was only one other person who spoke English in the office when I first arrived. Later on, there was another person who spoke English who came in. So she was kind of like my lifeline, and she like helped me out. She helped me help translate stuff whenever I got stuff in the mail or questions about anything. She would help me out with that. At the schools, when I was at the elementary schools, there's pretty much nobody who spoke English except for like maybe
Mm.
one person spoke
Yeah,
English.
okay.
And then at the junior high schools, there was at least one English teacher. One school
Yeah,
had like two or three. Um,
okay.
so I was speaking with them a lot, and being in that environment where everybody else was speaking Japanese to me all the time, it did help me pick up a lot of Japanese pretty
Yeah.
quickly as a result.
Hmm. So how was it for you to make friends?
It was pretty easy because the program we'd worked to get we even though I was the only teacher in my town, there were a lot of other people on the program, and we'd met some people. We had a training session in Tokyo before we left too, so I got to meet a lot of the other people who were going to be in the same prefecture, and we had a pretty good network that had been set up for us. So like it was the JET program. They've got these what are called like prefectural chapters of AJET, the Association of Japan Exchange and Teaching. And so these prefectural chapters, they're all just kind of like run within the prefecture, and they provide things like, activities, events, things like that. So I was able to get to know a lot of people through that. And then through there, just, going around meeting people. And so that's how it was actually pretty easy to make friends while I was on the program.
Okay. Okay. And then later, when you came back for the second time, you mentioned all your friends were still in the other city and in the other company.
Yeah. When I come back to Kagoshima, there were about in the group that I had that we came together, there was about like maybe 5 or 6 of us that actually stayed in Japan after the contracts ended. But it was only me and like one other person were the only ones who were still in Kagoshima. Everyone else had gone to like different parts of the country. So,
Okay.
so some people went to Tokyo, some people went to like Osaka or very different parts. So, there were some other people by that point I had, met other foreigners and made other friends. So I had still had this kind of existing network that existed that was in place there. And now, I'm married. I got 2 kids. So even though there is like this kind of, I've got a few friends that, will try to get together like once every 6 months or so. But I think, too, having kids, once you have kids, it's difficult. Your social life kind of gets shot to hell.
Yeah, exactly. But you meet more with your friends that also have kids versus the ones that don't have kids. It's kind of, you leave them out, but they also leave you out, kind of.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, like, it's hard to schedule. It's like hard to go out at night all the time, or
It is. Yeah. We
you
actually
have
had
to.
a situation because we had the big holiday week in Japan was the beginning of May, and one of my friends, he like sent out a group message to everyone. He's like, "Hey, let's I want to see if we can get everybody together." And so it's like one person was available on this day, another person was only available on this day, and so it's just kind of like, all right, well, I guess we can't do this.
So, how long did it take you to get used to the Japanese culture?
Not long. I think I had gone through the typical culture shock, and that was about like, about maybe 6 months or so. And I think after that point, I was pretty used to it. And
Okay.
yeah, so I'd say about 6 months or so, but it's 6 months to a year. And then by that point, I was pretty used to how things worked. And like I said, I was lucky because I had an organization, a board of education that was really supportive.
Mm-hmm.
They had an English speaker there, so they were very supportive.
Mm-hmm.
So I was lucky in that respect. Other people, they had not been so lucky. There's there's an acronym on the JET program, ESID. Every situation is different, and
Yeah.
basically it means that it will totally depend on the place you're at, the people you're around, and that can like make or break your experience. Because I know some people
Right.
who they were just pretty much ignored. Like they got like no support. Their board of education didn't care. Others were like under like their board of education like babied them, right? They're like taking care of them all the time and all that kind of stuff. So like I had this nice middle ground where they were there if I needed them, but if I didn't need them, they just kind of like, okay, well, you can take it, do your own thing then.
Okay. And is there anything that you still don't get, or that you still kind of find it hard to comprehend with?
Not so much. I mean, I think there are things that annoy me, like about the bureaucracy here. So, like, if you have to go to City Hall or anything like that, stuff like that can get annoying. We also have this ridiculous car inspection thing called shaken, where like every 2 years you have to pay this massive chunk of money to get your car like inspected from top to bottom.
Well, we
And
have that too in Germany.
yeah, it's just an excuse to get people to cycle through their cars more, so to keep the Japanese auto industry afloat, basically.
Okay, or to keep the roads safer.
Well, in theory that's what it's for, but in practice it's just to keep the automotive industry afloat because the inspection fee never goes down as your car depreciates in value. So after like 2 or 3 years, it gets to the point where it's not worth paying this fee to keep this car running.
And I think in Germany, it's like if you buy a new car, you can waive that inspection for 5 years.
Oh, really?
And then,
Well, that's nice.
then after every 2 years, you need to have it inspected.
Yeah,
And they
it's
do
every 2 years here.
brake checks.
Hmm.
I don't even know what they do. I haven't been there in so long. And
Yeah.
then here it's like they do a smog check and then they check if it's safe. But I mean, like
Hmm.
in in comparison, in Germany, you would not be allowed to drive such an old car. Like
Hmm.
here, they check if it's rusty or anything. So and I think like
Still let you drive old cars here. It's just as long as it can pass the inspection, and but it's like that's the thing. It's such an expensive fee,
uh-huh.
and it's most people will choose not to keep their cars running just because it's
Oh,
not worth
because
the expense of keeping it up and
I
running. Yeah.
see.
So that's one of the reasons why they keep doing it. So that's annoying. But other than that, like I'm pretty used to how things work here, and nothing really surprises me anymore.
Mhm.
So it's like when something happens, that is a result of bureaucracy or something like that. It never surprised me anymore. It's just like okay, that's just the way things are here.
Okay, and how is it to have like a Japanese family, like
Hmm.
Japanese in-laws? Does it have a different value than here?
I think it depends a lot on the family.
Mhm.
My wife doesn't get along that great with her mother, so we
Okay.
don't see her a whole lot. But she gets along really well with her sister, and so like her sister and her sister's kids will sometimes come and they'll stay the night over here on occasion. On occasion, my wife will take the kids and she'll go down to visit her sister's place.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, that stuff like that. But I've got a good relationship with her family. They were a little standoffish at first, but they warmed up pretty quickly, and they
Okay.
haven't been like my ex-wife, actually her family was amazingly supportive. so
Uh-huh.
uh so like it's not as supportive as that was, but it is still they're still they're good people. Like there's
Yeah.
nothing to complain about basically.
Yeah, nice. Um, would you say they were like a little bit hesitant in the beginning because you were American
Oh
or
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely, that's
that
exactly what it was. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and how do people in general react to Americans?
For the most part, in my experience, I haven't had a whole lot of negative reactions. When I was single and I was still dating, I did have a few like who were like, "Oh, you're American? Oh, no, no, I'm
Am
sorry."
I
And
gonna
so
date an
like
American?
basically, yeah,
Yeah.
like I don't want to date a foreigner type of thing. So
Okay.
because like some of the dating apps and things like that, they first you're communicating through messages, so they may
Yeah.
not realize at first. So and my Japanese was good enough, I guess, to fool them at first. So when they found out
Okay.
I was
Uh-huh.
American, they're just like, "Oh, no, 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 no." So like I had little things like that pop up. But in Kagoshima, at least, people are very friendly. People are very nice. So I haven't experienced like a whole lot of discrimination or anything like that here.
Not nice, yeah. Is there like now, I mean, it's been 15 years, is there anything that you miss?
Um, Mostly food. Like,
Food? Yeah.
I do miss, yeah, yeah. Like, you know, I do miss like Chicago deep dish pizza,
Uh-huh.
gyros, like Mexican food,
Yeah.
like that kind of stuff. I miss. Um, so whenever we go back to America, like we're planning a trip in August, and so I'm probably gonna eat a lot of crap food when we go there,
Yeah.
like which is good too, that stuff's not as readily available,
Uh-huh.
but it is also yeah, that's probably the thing I miss the most is just the food culture.
Mhm. Is it because your city is not big enough, or is it in general that in Japan you have more like Asian cuisine?
I think if you go to the bigger cities like Tokyo, Osaka, they'll have a
Mhm.
lot more like
Yeah.
foreign food restaurants. So I think it is really just a case of this is just the area we live in,
Right,
and it's
right. Mhm.
changed in recent years. Like when I first came here, the only examples of foreign restaurants were you had Indian, you had Italian, and you had Chinese, and that was about it.
And
Now
how
there are a few
was
other
it?
options. Depends on the restaurant. Like I was never a big like
How was the pizza?
not that great. It
But it's just because so many Asians are lactose intolerant and don't even like cheese is not that common, right?
No, actually, it's pretty common here. Like,
Ah,
yeah,
okay. I didn't know this.
I think that's mostly a myth, actually. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, or maybe it's just not as because like when I was even when I was at the teaching at the schools, like the kids always had milk with their lunch and stuff like that.
Mm.
So,
Oh, okay. And anything else that you miss?
Um, no. Like I do miss like being close to my family, like my mom and my
Hmm.
sister, that kind of thing. I do miss like being close to like my friends who still live in Chicago. So,
Hmm.
um, but again, we all have families now, so I'm not sure how much time we would actually
Right.
get to spend together.
Right.
Even when I do go back to Chicago, it's just like, oh, okay, well, we've got like maybe one day out of this like entire time I'm going to be there that I can see you. So,
Right. Yeah.
so yeah,
How
so I'm not
often?
even sure how different that would how. So it'd probably be I probably would see them as often as I do now, if I was
That's
still
what I
living
say
there.
too. Like, because like all my friends that I grew up with or that were my friends when I was a teenager, like they moved all over the country. So
Hmm.
even if I would live there, I would not see them much more,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah,
You know, like we would like still communicate the same way as we do now, just this WhatsApp or
right,
every
or
now and then
Facebook or
like
anything like that. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So I always think like if we would move there, I would not still I would still not see my friends more often.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. How often do you visit?
So we've gone more often lately. Like we went for Christmas at the end of 2021. And a big part of that was because my daughter had been born in the January previous. So, and my sister had her wedding too. So we went back because of that.
So your son was born January, or
Mm,
your daughter is born January 21.
yeah, yeah. And my son
Oh,
was
cool.
born
Mm.
in last year in July.
All right. So I think our you're older, my younger are the same age then.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's
She's
just
about
he's
2.5.
yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now we're going back again in August, and that's again because my son was born. So,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
but after this, like we're probably not going to be going back that often. Like like my mom helps us out to pay for the trip. It's expensive. Like even when
Mhm.
I was single, it was expensive. Like now we got a family of four, and this time at least he can still fly for free, but my daughter
Uh-huh.
now needs to pay for her seat.
Yeah.
And just even just the domestic flight to fly to Tokyo, because we were able to, because my daughter is still under 3, so we can still get her in for free. But just
Mhm.
that is like $600 for just the two
That's
of us
crazy.
for a round trip.
So
Yeah.
is airfare in general very expensive in Japan?
Compared to America, I'd say yes. I believe you can actually get flights in America domestically for less than $100, right?
Yeah, but not everywhere, but like
Okay.
to the main if you're lucky, yes.
Okay.
If you're
Okay.
lucky, you
So
find something.
yeah,
But
you might be able to find that too, but usually it's about like $100 or 100 plus, and here to fly domestically.
I'm just asking because for the same flights from Germany to here, it's way cheaper than the same flight, but you book it from America, it costs almost double.
Really?
For example, my mother flew to visit us and she found flights for like 400 euros
Hmm.
from Frankfurt to San Francisco.
Oh wow.
And like I always have to pay at least 1,000. If it's like under 1,000, it's like you're really lucky, but it's
Yeah,
usually
yeah.
always over 1,000.
No, that's true too here, because when I would pay for flights for myself, what I would usually do was I would use Korean Air because they were a lot cheaper. And usually I could
Mhm.
fly from Kagoshima and then I have to go to Seoul, and I maybe have to stay overnight in Seoul, and then from Seoul to Chicago. And that I could usually get for about $1,000, maybe less, for a round trip flight.
Right? Uh-huh.
And my but when my mom helps us out, she has all these points and miles with like
Yeah, okay,
American
nice. Yeah.
companies, and it's usually like twice as expensive, but
Oh,
because it
crazy.
gets offset by like the points and all that stuff. So
Yeah, that's crazy. But at least she has that points
yeah,
program. That's
and
nice.
I will say, like, but even still, like the Korean Airlines, they're not only are the airlines cheaper, but it's just such a much nicer experience flying
Yeah,
too.
mhm, yeah. For us, it's the same. Like when we were without kids, then it was like not that big question of visiting. But like now, you think like three times. Like, do I
Hmm.
really have to go? Like, I don't know. It's so expensive. Like 4 plane tickets. It's
Yeah. One of my coworkers, he is going back now this summer to Canada, and he hasn't been back in like 19 years. He said,
wow.
because he's got 3 kids and everything. So
Right, right. I
this
mean,
year
how do you
he's going
pay
yeah,
for
he's going
this?
alone. He's not going with his kids. He's just going by himself. But
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, like, and I was talking to my mom. I think from now on, it's probably going to be more like my mom is more likely to come visit us than we are
Sure.
to go
Yes.
visit her.
Yes. How often did she come, or your
She's only come
family?
once before, and that was before, that was like years ago. So that was before I met
Oh,
my
I
wife.
see.
That was but she's talking now about maybe coming to visit next year. So
Yeah, of course.
she's talked about that before though. So we'll see how that actually turns out.
Yeah, but I mean, now it probably makes more sense because
Hmm.
it's like, okay, I pay this much and they pay like 4 times the price
Right.
if they
Yeah.
come.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It might be more likely that maybe she pays for the kids to come over or something like that in the future, or something along those
Mm,
lines would be more likely,
yeah.
I think.
So whenever you visit the US, I mean, you only visited a long time, kind of a long time ago, but
Hmm.
do you remember anything about a reverse culture shock?
Not when I go back to visit, because I'm usually only there for maybe 2 weeks max when
Mm-hmm.
I go back to visit. But it did happen when I did move back briefly. So
Okay.
that was about 5 years ago now, 5 6 years ago. That time when I moved back, yeah, I experienced a huge reverse culture shock.
Okay. Like what?
Just like a lot of the different things, like, like I mentioned, like being able to talk to people easily, like just having
Mm,
just also how big America is in comparison, and just like
right.
how, like, when I was, even even though I had a car here, like there's still plenty of places I can easily walk to. Like
Yeah.
there's a grocery store, like, a 5 minute walk away. There's a convenience store
Mm-hmm.
like 10 minutes walk away. It takes me like 10 minutes to walk to the train station,
Right. Everything's
and
closed.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to walk there. Like the sidewalks are pretty wide. They're very safe to walk on, so you don't have to. It's not like. But when I was in San Diego, there was a shopping plaza next to my apartment building, but
Uh-huh.
next to was still like a 15-minute walk away. and
Right. Yeah.
and there was like no sidewalk. It was like not really that
Right.
easy to walk on. So it's like you're
Right.
walking along this busy road, and you got this tiny shoulder you're walking on. So it's like
Yeah.
that was a big thing too. Like, just like, going around, if you don't have a car, it's almost impossible.
It's like kind of dangerous,
It
even.
is,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. That was for me too when we moved to Austin. I was also like, where are the sidewalks?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We were in the Bay Area before in California, and there were sidewalks everywhere. Like, people walk there.
Mm-hmm.
But so I thought that's pretty common. So I was very surprised that it's not the case everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, in Japan, it's set up even in places where public transportation is not as good. The roads are still set up to make it easy for people to walk.
Yeah. I didn't even know how to walk to the playground,
Mm-hmm.
because I was like, my daughter was like 2.5 when we came here, and the playground was a 15-minute walk just through the neighborhood. And I was like, we cannot walk. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I feel like I don't want to walk with you on the street the whole time. It
Yeah,
was like
yeah,
still a quiet street, but like still, it's like this is really doesn't feel so good.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. Like, we have that here too. Like, if I have to work and I have to take the car, my wife, she's still on maternity leave, so she's still at home with the
Hmm.
kids, and so she'll, like, she'll put one in the stroller, she'll put the other in the baby carrier, and she'll walk to the park. It's like, again, like 10 15 minute walk, very easy
Hmm.
to walk to from here. um
Hmm.
but in America, like you're saying, that walk might be kind of dangerous.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy, and especially like on the very busy streets. Yeah, like
Hmm.
sometimes it's like, hey, I'm on this corner and I just need to go across the road, but it happens to be like, I don't know, 4 lanes
Yeah, yeah.
and no traffic light for pedestrians,
Hmm.
So it's like,
Exactly,
how
yeah.
do I get there?
Yeah, my mom lives in
Yeah.
a condo now, and it's in a suburban area, and there's this big, like, shopping plaza with, like, restaurants and all that, like, a short walk from her place, but there's like no sidewalks to walk there.
It's so weird. I mean,
Yeah,
also because I think having a car is so expensive,
it
it's
is. Yeah.
you have so I mean, here kinda everybody assumes that you have a car, but I
Hmm.
mean, you kinda just need to work to afford your car
Yeah.
because gas, insurance,
Hmm.
registration, then the car itself,
Yeah. Yeah.
repairs. Yeah, I don't
Hmm.
know. And would you ever consider moving back to the US?
No, definitely not. Like it's after the time I attempted to, I'm just like, okay, so I tried it, and no, I'm not gonna would not do that again. I might move to another country, like I would not be opposed to like moving to like Canada or Australia or something like
Okay.
that. But like moving back to America, absolutely hard no. Like it's just the social safety net is just completely eroded in America now, and
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean like here we get and just the cost of living is so ridiculously high there. I mean, when I was in San Diego, I was paying about $1,400 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment, and
Mm-hmm.
and that was cheap. That was
Yeah,
cheap.
that is cheap. Yes, it was cheap.
And you know, private health insurance is like what, like 500 or something if you're lucky for just basic bare bones health insurance. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Here I pay like maybe 200 a month for health insurance, and that covers
Mm-hmm.
me and my kids. My wife's
Mm-hmm.
on company insurance, so that's a different story. We don't
Mm-hmm.
have to worry about her. And our house, we've got a house here. It's a 2-bedroom house, and it costs us about 500 a month. Um,
That's crazy. It's so
yeah,
cheap.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and you can, I mean, it's an older house, but it's still like you can find
Uh-huh.
decent homes here for less than $1,000 a month, and you can't
That is
find that in
nice.
America. And
No.
there's a social safety net here. Like we get money for our kids. The government gives us like a child benefits. Like they give us
Mm-hmm.
when they're young, it's like I think we get like basically like $1,000 every 3 or 4 months or so is what they give us. So like every
Okay.
3 to 4 months they give us like $1,000 for
Mm-hmm.
um or
For
1,200.
both of them, or
Yeah, because it was like 150 a month, but it's like paid out over 4 months. So it's like, so with the both of
I
them it's like
see.
$1,200 every
Yeah, I
every
see. We
four
have that
months or
in
so.
Germany too.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
It's also,
and
I think it's, I mean, it's been so long, but I think it's about the same.
and they're talking about increasing that now too. Like they're
Uh-huh.
they're they're to boost like the population and all that. They're increasing the benefits they give to families. So
Yeah.
like I mean just like and just the cost of living in general. Like one of the things people will say about Japan is that the salaries are so low, and that's true. Like I make about in a good year maybe 30,000 a year.
But you
Um,
have way less
it's
expenses.
so much more. It's so much cheaper to live here.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, when I tell people like I make like about $2,000 a month, they're like, "What? How do you live on that?" I'm like, "Well, everything is cheap here, so it's
Yeah.
really easy."
So yeah, it's not a bad, it's not
Mhm.
bad income for having low expenses.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's safe. Like when my kids don't go to school yet, but when they
Yes.
start going to school, I don't have to worry that someone's gonna come in and
Yeah.
shoot the place up. Like that is not even a concern
Yeah,
here.
that's insane. Yeah. It is stupid. Yeah. And I don't even get why they're I don't even get why they allow it, you know?
Don't even get me started.
Yeah,
We'll
no.
be here all day.
Yes, I'm on the same page. Okay. I think pretty much we got it. I don't have any more questions.
Okay, great.
So I thank you for your time. It was really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So thank you for tuning in for this week's episode with Worlds Collide. I guess Perry really upsold the JET program here. So if you're in the point of your life where you think like, hey, maybe I could move to a different country, and why not Japan? So, hey, the JET program really sounds great. Give it a try. So maybe you could just move to Japan for a few years and teach English. Just an idea. And I also wanted to tell you about Perry's 2 podcasts. One is called Japan on Film, and the other one is called Superhero Cinephiles. And he also has a website because he's also an author. It's percivalconstantine.com, and you will find all of these 3 things in my show notes in case you don't remember everything. Yeah, just look here in the show notes. And yeah, if you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave it a 5-star review at wherever you listen to this. And if you're curious or if you're interested in being a guest on my show, then please reach out to me. You can send me an email at worldscollide123pod@gmail.com, Or you can also just write me a line on Instagram. It's Worlds Collide Pod, just one word. And then there's also a TikTok, Worlds Collide Pod, and a Threads where it's Worlds Collide Podcast. I think now I got all of them. So you can find me everywhere and follow me everywhere. And I hope again you tune in again next week, and I stop talking now, but I will see you next time. Bye!